Hello and welcome to The Public Good. This is Sam Magavern from the Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, which unites over 275 community organizations working to build a better Buffalo. Delighted to be joining you every Tuesday at 1 p.m. on Facebook Live and 7 p.m. on WUFO 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 AM. Today we'll be joined by Michelle Jones. She's the Director of Liberty Partnerships at the University of Buffalo, and she's also an Open Buffalo Democracy. She'll be talking about her project titled From the Inside Out, which is a project to help people who have been impacted by domestic violence to share their stories and give a message of hope using the medium of photography. Don't forget to follow PPG on Facebook and Twitter, and of course you can always get great information on our website, ppgbuffalo.org. The Public Good is sponsored in part by Univaria Healthcare, real people who really care. You can get videos from The Public Good, including our 3-minute highlight videos on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. A few quick announcements before we get started. Tomorrow, Wednesday evening at 7 p.m., there will be a forum on affordable housing. I'll be one of the panelists. I'll be joined by John Washington from Push Buffalo and Assemblyman Sean Ryan and Davida Alexander, a lawyer active in housing issues. That will be tomorrow, September 19th at 7 p.m. at DeUville College in the Academic Center. That is free and open to the public. You can get more information about that from our website. Also want to let you know this weekend we'll be part of the Buffalo Humanities Festival. That is happening Thursday, Friday, and Saturday here in Buffalo. All kinds of great events. You should look at the Humanities Festival website to find out more about that. But on Saturday afternoon, I'll be moderating a panel called Buffalo Niagara at the Crossroads, and that will take place at Buff State in Rockwell Hall, 2:30 on Saturday. I'll be joined by John Washington from Push, Lorna Hill from Ujima Theater, a Buffalo Public School student, and Andrew Markham from Buffalo Transit Riders United. We'll be talking about efforts to fight for environmental justice and related things here in the city of Buffalo and the region. That is Saturday at 2:30 p.m. And the monthly Justice and Opportunity Coalition meeting will be September 20th at 5:30 p.m. at 1423 North Fillmore. Justice and Opportunity is a citywide coalition of organizations, activists, advocates, clergy, and community leaders whose goal is to reduce the rates of racial disparities within arrests and incarceration in Buffalo and Erie County. So that's Justice and Opportunity. Their monthly meeting, September 20th, 5:30 at 1423 Fillmore. All right, with that, I want to welcome Michelle Jones to The Public Good. Michelle, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
You've got a busy life running Liberty Partnerships, which is a dropout prevention program housed at UB. But in addition to that, you are an Open Buffalo Democracy Fellow this year, working on a really interesting project. So tell us about From the Inside Out.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam. What I have envisioned for this project is that I would use photography as my medium, and I would do a series of interviews with folks who have been impacted both directly and indirectly by domestic violence. So asking a series of questions, allowing for them to share a bit of their story, concluding with an I am statement, which would ultimately give people the opportunity to take their voices back through these shared stories.
So people who have been impacted by domestic violence might have lost some of their voice, some of their power to tell their own story.
Yes.
And your goal is to give that back to them through photography.
Absolutely.
And these will be photographs that you'll take of them, or that they'll take, or how will it work?
Yes. So after hearing each respective story, I listen in very carefully and decide a body part that I would choose to zoom in on. So for me, it's so important. You can be sitting right next to someone and not really have a background information on the fact that they may have been impacted by domestic violence. So the idea and thought is to really zoom in on a body part and then use that as the photography. And then in addition to that, it's important to be able to hear their story. So I've included a QR code on the actual picture so that people can hear the person's voice.
So you'll create a website and people will see the photographs that you've taken
Yes.
of the person, but then they will be able to listen to that person telling their own story.
Yes.
And giving their own voice. A really interesting project. Have you had some experience in the past using photography in a related way, or learning to use photography as a medium?
Yes, actually, I was took a class through Open Buffalo in collaboration with the SIBA Gallery called Visions, where we took photography and we were able to utilize it in an auction to create funds for Open Buffalo.
So tell us a little more about your inspiration for this project and why you think that domestic violence was an issue that needed addressing in our community.
Sure. So 1 in 4 women will have been impacted by domestic violence in their lifetime. So that's an alarming rate. It's an alarming number. In addition to that, I believe that I work with youth, and it's so important that they know the warning signs early on about domestic violence and the signs. So I think it's so important for us to really give people the information that there's support out there if they happen to be dealing with that or know someone who's dealing with that. You're right here in Buffalo.
Yeah. So you mentioned working with youth and that it's important for them to know the warning signs. Tell us a little more about that. So if you're talking to a youth about this, how do you explain it to them?
Sure. So some of the warning signs. I mean, teen dating. There's a lot of that happening nowadays, and so just really sharing information about what to expect. So if you're feeling unsafe, making sure that you know kind of your boundaries, and then knowing that there's outlets within, for example, school systems, so school social workers, your principal, school psychologist. It's so important for them to know that there is a space for them to go. Some
resources.
Yes.
And how about when you're talking with adults or through this project, when you want to share resources with people, what are some of the best resources that you might recommend for people in the community facing this issue?
Absolutely. Crisis services would be one. In addition to that, the Family Justice Center would be a key resource for anyone who may be facing, being impacted by domestic violence and needing that support.
Yeah. So walk us through your project a little bit. So
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about the process of taking it from an idea to reality.
Sure. So, initially, you have this great idea, or what you think is a great idea, but as time goes on, you realize, there's so many other things that I need to pay attention to. So, for example, the photography to me is the fun part, and it's the easier part, if you would, but the technology is the part where you're kind of doing a juggling game to decide whether or not is the QR code something that's going to be usable for everyone. I have a 14-year-old son, and he says, "Mom, just download Snapchat and you can scan." But I said, tell them everyone doesn't have Snapchat, and that might not be something that somebody like my mom may be willing to download or have access to. So I had to think about that too. So which is where the website came into play. So I'll have ultimately a website in addition to the QR code where people can go.
And how many folks are you looking to work with? How many people?
Sure. I'm looking for this year, no more than 10. I think that's a good number to start with. I hope that this project would be sustainable after the fellowship is over, because I think it's so important that we have an increased awareness to what domestic violence is, how folks are impacted, both directly and indirectly, and the support systems in place.
Yeah, so you've identified some people whose photograph you want to take and whose story you'd like to help make heard. Is there still room for more if there are folks out there who've been impacted by domestic violence
Absolutely.
and are interested in this project?
Absolutely. I can be contacted at my email address if people may be interested. Everything is anonymous. I do have a waiver form for people to sign because I will be zooming in again on a body part, and in addition to that, their voice would be used as well. So there is a waiver that folks would sign. But yes, there's plenty of room.
But you wouldn't be using their names or an image of their face that would be recognizable.
Not at all.
Yeah, so if folks are concerned about their privacy, they'll know that they'll have some privacy here. Okay, if I go ahead and share your email
Sure,
then with
that would be
folks. Okay, if you are interested in learning more about this project of Michelle Jones, you can reach her at mjones4@buffalo.edu, mjones4@buffalo.edu to learn more about this. In addition to creating the website, are you thinking of doing an exhibit of the work in a physical space somewhere as well?
Yes, I am. I have a few calls out there for different spaces that I'm looking to utilize. I don't want to necessarily put forth where, because I'm not exactly sure, but I do have some spaces that I'm very interested in using, and I hope to have that solidified in the next couple of weeks.
Great. And when are you looking to go live with this project?
Yes, I'm hoping to go live in November.
In November
yes,
this year, great.
In November this year, yes.
And do you already have a website domain name reserved, or that's still to come?
It's still to come, in the process.
So
yes.
we won't share that yet, but we'll urge people to keep an eye out as we get into November to look for this really interesting project. So as you've talked to people so far who might be interested in participating, tell us a little bit about what that's been like. So as you've approached people and asked them if they might want to share their stories, what kind of response have you had, and what do you think they're looking to get out of it, that sort of thing?
Sure. So the response has been overwhelmingly great. I think people are looking for spaces for support, and also for a space to share their story. One of the questions that I do ask people who participate once they've shared a bit of kind of where they've been is, what was their turning point? And I think that's key, and that's huge. What was their turning point? What was the deciding factor that they said that this was enough and that they needed to get out?
And what does that sometimes look like for people? What is an example of a turning point?
Sure. Someone knowing their worth. Knowing their worth. Being tired of being financially supported solely by another person, where they're feeling stuck, and deciding, I've had enough, and contacting appropriate resources or talking to family. I think that's the biggest piece, is talking to someone, whether it's family or an organization who supports folks who have been impacted. I think that's huge.
Yeah. You're listening to The Public Good. We're talking today with Michelle Jones. She's the director of Liberty Partnerships, which is a dropout prevention program based at the University of Buffalo. But today we're talking about a project she's working on independently. It's called From the Inside Out, and it is creating a platform for people who have been impacted by domestic violence to share their stories, and for Michelle to take photographs of part of them. And I guess we have an example here of a photograph of someone's lips.
Yes.
It's the sort of thing that might be part of this. So you mentioned, we were talking about turning points for people, and I could picture that in some cases the turning point comes from a really negative, horrible experience of domestic violence, where someone is saying, I can't take this anymore.
Yes.
But it was interesting to me when you were describing it that the turning point might also be really much more a positive feeling of self-worth, or a positive exposure to resources, and knowing that there is support out there. So I just wonder if you could talk a little more about that, what the role of those sort of positive messages can be in helping people to make a change.
Sure. So I think as I've begun to interview people, a common thread or pattern would be that they're actually sharing their stories, not feeling like they're isolated. So a continued communication with others is very, very important in this kind of work.
And my understanding of domestic violence is that isolation is often a very key part of it.
Yes.
That abusers seek to isolate victims, and that's a very important part of the dynamic.
Yes.
So it sounds like part of your project is to deliver that sort of positive message. You mentioned a message of hope. So
yes.
Tell us a little more about that. how do you kind of anticipate that message of hope coming across to people?
Sure. So after the series of questions, each participant is asked if they would give an I am statement. So that's the last thing you actually hear of each person who has participated story. So for example, someone may give an I am statement like, I am worth it. I am wonderful. So it's just, again, you share your story, no matter how ugly it may look, and then at the end, giving that I am statement, a very strong statement of this is who I am now, where I am right now, and in this present time. So. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about using art in a sort of non-traditional way, beyond sort of people going to look at photographs in a museum or a gallery and just appreciating them for being beautiful or being interesting. Have you been inspired by examples of people using art in ways sort of more like you're thinking to use it?
Sure. I think just public art in general is just awesome. It's out, like, you don't have to pay to see it. You can, go on the weekend and take a look at it during the week, during a lunch break. So I think it's so important and great that public art exists. So I mean, there's so many different examples of public art here in Buffalo. The Freedom Wall on Michigan and the Michigan Corridor is beautiful. It tells so many stories of pioneers from past to present. So I think that public art is it's fun. It's key, and it gives people access to it without having to maybe have the constraints of having to pay to go into a gallery.
So that's interesting. You've been inspired by some of the public art going on in Buffalo in this project, and you mentioned that you had taken the Visions class with SEPA and honed your photography skills there as well. Is this something, did you grow up being interested in art and making art yourself, or is it newer to you in life? Or?
So I was a graduate of the Buffalo Academy for Visual and Performing Arts. My major was vocal music. It was not... but I think it's just in me, having a passion for art. So just photography is one thing that I'm passionate about, as well as abstract painting. So do you do abstract painting yourself? I do
as well?
I do, for fun. I do for fun.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
And how about singing? Are you still singing?
I'll leave that to my son, who that's his thing now. So not so much, but
you passed on that.
That's right.
That legacy. Awesome. Well, you've been an Open Buffalo Democracy Fellow this year, and I want to ask you a little bit about that experience. So for folks who are not familiar with the program, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Absolutely. So the Democracy Fellows program is a very unique fellowship that right now there's 5 fellows. So I have some peers that are also doing great work for a year long. It's a year-long program, and it allows for people to really focus in on a social justice issue faced in our community.
So 5 people doing 5 different projects, and then I know you get together at least once a month and receive some training. Tell us a little bit about the kinds of training you're getting, and if there are certain things that have been particularly interesting to you throughout the program.
So the training is extremely helpful. One, in the sense that you're kind of connecting with people who are like-minded. So whether it's community organizing or trying to think of some other ones, cultural competency. There's a number of there's a list of them, but it's really helpful in that regard, as well as just having a space to share your project, kind of bounce ideas off of folks, as well as making some really critical and important connections. Well, I think one of the very interesting ones that I attended workshops was centered around boards and commissions, and what that is all about, being a part of a board or a commission in the city of Buffalo. So that was very interesting, and I learned quite a bit about that.
Now, are you presently serving on any boards or commissions, or are you interested in doing that possibly in the future?
I'm not presently serving on any, but I am interested in serving.
Good to know. So elected officials out there listening, we've got a candidate for you for city or county board or commission. The incredibly talented Michelle Jones is interested, so take note. So that's great to hear that the program has been helpful to you. Tell us a little bit about kind of your path toward getting to this kind of work, Liberty Partnerships and the Inside Out project. So from Buffalo, it sounds like, went to performing arts?
I did. I was born in Philadelphia, actually, but I spent most of my time, I was raised here in Buffalo. I'm a Buffalonian, even though the Bills have been doing extremely not so good, but I'm still a proud supporter. Once a fan, always a fan of the Buffalo Bills. But yes, I'm from Buffalo, originally born in Philadelphia, as I mentioned, and yeah, I think the arts in this area is so important. There's so many different avenues that you can take with art.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity not too long ago, a few weeks ago, to speak with a group of survivors, just to share where I am in my project. And they had some really wonderful feedback for me around, kind of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I hope that, after the year is over, maybe this can kind of flourish on to maybe something even nationally, because I think it's that important that we know and know about the resources out there and that there's support for those being impacted.
Yeah, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about sort of the role of silence and stigma or shame or isolation, some of the things that keep barriers from people communicating about something that's literally a life or death issue.
Sure. I think, like you mentioned earlier, isolation is huge. You're not able to necessarily be with friends, family, and those are some of the signs that you want to really pay attention to. Check in on your friends, your family. If you're noticing a pattern of changed behavior, they're not available, not answering calls. I think that's key. And also knowing where to get support. Because maybe family may be close, but may not have all the answers. So making sure you know what those resources are out there.
Yeah, I would imagine for many people, they might suspect that a friend or a loved one is a victim of domestic violence and just really not know what to do about it, not feel like they know how to talk to the person about it or know what to do. Is there advice that you would give to somebody if you think that someone you care about is a victim of domestic violence? What would be a good step to take, would you say?
Sure. Well, I guess in the more, if it's a life or death kind of situation, calling 911, in that kind of an emergency, but actually, kind of geographically knowing the points of support in the area. So the Family Justice Center being one, crisis services being another. So knowing where you can actually get support.
So important to link people up with those resources and for them to know that there's help out there. What's next for you, Michelle? So after you finish this project, talk to us a little bit about your dreams and visions for work related to this or other kinds of community-based work that you're interested in doing.
Sure. So I really the hope is that this would go much past the year that the fellowship is, that the fellowship takes place. But also maybe considering and thinking about public art, using public art for other issues. To be able to showcase or be able to use public art to represent or kind of have a voice for other issues outside of domestic violence.
Wow, interesting. So are there some other issues that are calling out to you right now that you?
Oh, there's so many, Sam. There's so many that I think it's important too to if you have a passion for something, commit to one thing, not kind of spread yourself too thin. But education is always something that's close to my heart. So. So education, that may be something in the near future. Yeah. You've been working in dropout prevention for quite a few years now at Liberty Partnerships. Yes. Is there a lesson that you've learned through that work about what you think really works? What the key to keeping kids in school is? That's an excellent question, Sam. I think just really making sure you're having some genuine, authentic relationships with the students, keeping an open mind while working with them, and engagement too. Just really being able to engage students daily,
Mm.
and meeting
Mm.
them, and also meeting them where they currently are.
Mm. Mm-hmm. So I imagine that it's hard to win trust of young people as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
What works? How do you approach a youth who's maybe a little guarded, a little suspicious?
Sure. I guess just figuring out what their interests are. Maybe the go-to will first be like, hey, you're missing a ton of your homework, but instead of starting there, maybe you want to start with kind of what they're interested in, career-wise, and making a connection first, and then you can talk about the other stuff.
So you make a connection around something positive
Yes.
that's they're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Before you say, hey, we got a problem
That's
here,
right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that sounds like really good advice. All right, well, we are running out of time. I want to thank Michelle Jones. She's the Director of Liberty Partnerships. She's also an Open Buffalo Democracy Fellow. And I want to urge you to be on the lookout this fall, probably in November, for her project From the Inside Out. She will be using photography to give people who have been impacted by domestic violence a platform and a place to tell their stories and offer a message of hope. So a wonderful project from Michelle Jones coming up this fall. Thank you so much, Michelle, for doing that.
Thank you, Sam.
Want to let you know that we will be back next week on The Public Good. We will be discussing the issue of bail, and in particular cash bail and efforts to reform the use of cash bail in Buffalo and around the state. That is next week, Tuesday, September 25th, 7 p.m. on WUFO Power 96.5 FM, Mix 1080 AM, 1 p.m. on Facebook Live. Thank you so much. Thanks, Michelle.